Everybody, welcome back to the First Two Network Spring Conference. I'm Sue Ann, and I'm sitting in for Jade right now. And this session is called Promising Practices in Shared Learning. So as it said in the intro to this session, the First Two Network consists of different working groups. And these working groups attack the STEM persistence problem from many different areas, and they test change ideas. So change ideas are documented, and their impact and outcomes for students are documented. And we're always refining our change ideas to come up with the best practices that will improve student persistence. Our working groups are comprised not only of faculty and adults in our network, but also of students in our network as well. They have a working group and they execute change ideas too. So today we are going to be concentrating on some of the change ideas introduced by some of our adults in some cases. And you're going to hear a lot about what we're learning through this rapid testing of ideas. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to your first conference person in this session, and that is Michelle. So take it away, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Richards-Babb. I am a professor of chemistry at West Virginia University. I'm also the director of the Office of Undergraduate Research at West Virginia University. And currently, I am co-chair of the Immersion Working Group. And my co-facilitators will introduce themselves when they begin to speak. So welcome. If you could please use the link in the chat to share some information with us, or just put it in the chat. For instance, what's your name? Your association, meaning what school are you at, or what industry or nonprofit, what's your discipline, and why are you here? So go ahead and enter that information in the chat. We'll all be reading it, but in the interest of time, while you're entering information in the chat, I will move on to some housekeeping. So please be sure that your mic is muted when others are speaking. Please keep your camera on. We'd like to see you, but if you feel uncomfortable, that's fine. You can keep it off. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions, make comments, or provide reactions to anything we're saying. And just to let you know, this session is being recorded, and it will be available on the conference webpage the afternoon of Friday, May 14th. So if you don't want your image shown, if you don't want people to know your name, you could always change your name or something like that. So just to be aware of that. Our first two students who are here, and I saw a lot of them, are encouraged to speak first and to provide their view of the promising practices that we're going to talk about. So we do want to give them some space to give some comments. At the end of the session, we ask that you complete a quick 1-minute survey at the link that will be provided in the chat at the end. And then one lucky person will win a $25 Visa gift card for registering for the conference. So why are we doing this? What is the challenge to our work? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why is First Two forming the network? Well, it turns out that fewer than half of all students who begin STEM majors complete those majors to earn their degrees, and we want to double that. First-generation college students in particular are more vulnerable to attrition, meaning they don't complete their STEM degrees or they switch out. Statewide statistics for West Virginia are really hard to come by, but nationally, 1/3 of all students starting college are first generation, and 25% are first generation and low income, both indicators that tend to not foster completion of college. The first 2 years of post-secondary education, college, are critical to persistence, thus the name first 2 years of college. And we do our work in the First Two Network using what are called PDSA cycles. First of all, we want to engage people who can affect change, and we want to network with people who can affect the change. And we're going to do the changes, make the changes using PDSA cycles to test change ideas, which can be very small to very large. So you start with the plan stage. What's your change idea? What's your prediction? You then go through the do stage where you're going to execute your plan. You're going to measure things, then you're going to study it, and then you're going to act. You're either going to adapt the change, you're going to adopt it, or maybe it just didn't work and you're going to abandon it. So for instance, to use PDSA cycles to document your change ideas. When I first saw PDSA cycles, I thought, this is dumb. This is just like research, right? I'm already doing this, right? In my teaching, in my outreach, in my research, I'm already doing this. But the PDSAs aren't dumb, as I initially kind of thought. They're actually really kind of cool because it allows you to document change ideas that aren't necessarily at the level of research. It maybe it may not be something you're going to publish, but it's a really important idea that you need to document. Change ideas often involve something really small in teaching, administration, and outreach, and they allow you to document and assess it to track those ideas. So for instance, let's look at a really, short example. So maybe you're teaching a class and you have all of these office hours and none of your students are coming to any of your office hours. So the problem is that students don't visit your office hours. So you're like, how can I improve that? I want students to visit my office hours. So maybe your change idea is that, well, I'm going to try holding office hours right after class. Maybe my students will be they'll tend to come to those office hours. So then you say, you plan to do that. I'm going to hold office hours right after class, and I'm going to predict that 5 more students will come to those after class office hours than come to my normal office hours. And then you figure out what data you're going to collect. Well, you're going to just kind of collect how many students visited you during those after class office hours and compare it to your predictions. So then you're going to do it. You're going to implement the change idea. You're going to hold office hours right after class. You're going to collect the data. You're just going to know how many students visited and maybe what did we discuss. And then you're going to review your results and you're going to compare the results to your predictions and summarize what you learned. So maybe you hold those office hours right after class and you're like, I only had 2 more students visit me when I held office hours right after class than when I had them when I was available. So what could I do next? How can I act? What action will I take? So you're either going to adopt that idea, you're going to adapt it, or abandon it. So in this case, maybe you would adapt it because you got more students to come, but not as many as you wanted. So maybe you would adapt it. Maybe you would survey the students and try to figure out when they're most available. Maybe you need to have office hours in the evening. So now you're going to do the PDSA cycle again, but your new change idea is that you're going to hold office hours in the evening when your students are most available to come to those office hours, and you're going to collect the data again and go through the whole process again. So that would be a really simple PDSA cycle. It's not something you're going to publish or do big time research on, but it's really valuable information for you that can really help your students and affect how well they do in your course and how they approach your course. PDSA cycles support disciplined inquiry. We document what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and whether it worked. They're evidence-based. We make decisions based on measurable, reproducible data that changes over time and with PDSA cycle iteration. They're rapid tests of change. We don't have to wait a whole year to figure out whether it worked. It could be just a couple of times we do those office hours, they didn't work, so we're going to change it during the semester. So we build and maintain momentum so that we can make good decisions quickly rather than perfect decisions never. And the PDSA cycle isn't supposed to be a once and done. Down here, you do the first PDSA cycle. It's really small scale. It's something that you can affect a change on. It's not something that someone else can affect a change on. You can only affect change on something you have control over. So you do this really small scale test. Maybe it doesn't work exactly right. So you adapt it, you change it up, you fine tune the test, you do it again. Maybe it's starting to work better. You start to talk to other people about it. Other people start to get interested. Maybe now they're like, I'm going to try that PDSA that you did. I'm going to try that and see how it works. And then eventually maybe it goes to scale where maybe it is now a research project that you can bring others in and publish in the literature. But it doesn't have to be. But you see how it's an iterative process, and you start out with something small, make those changes, and then keep going from there. And the First Two Network has 4 areas that drive what we believe is we're driving things towards greater STEM retention and success of our students. We want to engage our students with undergraduate institutions, meaning we want to meaningfully connect our students with their institution that they're attending, with the faculty, the staff, and the campus, and with programs at the institution. We want to engage our students with science, process, and community. And to do that, we can provide them with research experiences in the summer or during the academic year to foster in them a sense of belonging and competence, that they are, STEM professionals, they're part of the community. We want to foster in our students leadership skills so that they can lead in this effort. They can identify issues that are impeding students to succeed in their STEM disciplines, and they can help us create solutions. And then we also want to go back and look at how ready are our students for college. And RFG stands for Rural First Generation Students. Those are the students we're most focused on, although we're hoping that what we do affects all students. We want to make sure our students are ready for college, that they've attained the requisite knowledge and skills, and that they can succeed. So with these 4 areas that we're using to try to drive STEM retention and success, we have 4 different working groups. And the members create and implement promising change ideas through PDSAs as part of a working group. And just so you know, student voice and input are central to our group functioning. We want the students to give us ideas and have input into everything we do. So our 4 working groups are student leadership, and they're working on the area of engagement and leadership. Faculty student engagement, working on engagement with undergraduate institutions. Immersive experiences, that's engagement with science, process, and community. And then college readiness, readiness for college. And in this talk, the promising practices we're going to talk about come from the faculty student engagement working group and the immersive experiences working group. But of course, student leadership is kind of interlinked with all of the groups. So that's very important for everything we do. So as an overview, there's 3 sections to our talk. I'm going to start off the first section with the first change idea, and that's going to be the embedded students program in STEM courses. And then Mike Foltz is going to do the early research experience, and Sarah Sawyer and Catherine Williamson are going to talk about breaking down barriers between faculty and students. So these are a couple of our more promising change ideas. So the embedded student project, embedding students in STEM courses. This kind of came about during COVID because we were worried about how to engage students in research and pay them in research when maybe they won't be allowed in the lab because of COVID restrictions. So we wanted to be able to pay them to do network work. So this kind of came out of that. So it was originally fashioned the way it was so that students could get paid individually. So the embedded student project, it provides student voice and it connects students with their instructors. So in this project, students provide weekly anonymous journal feedback to their STEM course instructors, and a campus coordinate facilitates and makes sure everything is anonymous. So for WVU, I'm the campus coordinator. The instructor gains because they're getting a lot of information from their students and from, depends how many students they have, about the methods they're using for teaching the class and the classroom environment. And they're getting feedback on which content the students understood or don't understand. And it's just in time, it's weekly. It allows the instructor to get feedback to allow for timely modifications. It's not at the end of the semester when they can't make any changes. The students gain because as they're journaling, they identify learning strengths, they uncover areas of confusion, they think about their own learning, which is metacognition, and they focus their learning for the upcoming week. When we implemented it, we had students embed for 1 or 2 STEM classes. Initially, during the fall 2020 pilot, it was for either a chemistry and or a math course. In spring, we broadened it out so that they could do it for any 1 of or any 2 of their STEM courses, with chemistry and math being the primary focus if they were taking those. Students completed 15 weekly reports per class, that was a maximum, and they earned mini scholarships. And if they couldn't complete a report because they were just too busy, that was fine. They just didn't, get a scholarship for that. The weekly reports were anonymized and they were sent to course instructors. Students submitted the reports on Saturday, and by Sunday afternoon, I had already anonymized those and sent those to course instructors. And the example weekly report, I can put the link in the chat when I'm done talking, but it asks students to document how many hours they spent each day attending the class, how many hours they spent each day doing things for the class, like doing homework or studying or rewriting their notes, how many, and then what content they understood, they had mastered, what content they were totally confused on. One thing that the instructor did that really helped their learning, and one thing they think the instructor could do that would improve their learning, maybe from some other class, so the instructor is learning as well. So then students completed a maximum of 2 additional surveys. Pre the semester, it was a learning strategy survey, and then post the semester after they've gone through the embedded student project and journaled for us. And this is some of our data. The fall 2020 semester was a pilot semester. It was the first time we ever implemented it. We had 8 students who were submitting reports. We had about 9 instructors receiving those reports. And that was for about 11 different class sections. So it was like 6 math sections and 5 chemistry sections. Overall, those 8 students submitted 130 different reports, and it was just located at WVU for that semester. In spring 2021, we broadened out to Marshall University. So we had 2 institutions involved. We had 17 embedded students. We had about 25 instructors receiving the reports. There were a couple instructors who chose not to receive the reports. That was for about 34 sections of STEM courses. A lot of them were math and chemistry, but we also had biology, plant science, geography, a couple courses like that. We had a total of 385 reports submitted. Anecdotally, we had some students indicate that they saw their instructor make changes based on feedback they had written in the reports. And one student even indicated that she had done something, she had improved her study for a quiz because she hadn't done that well on a quiz. And then she looked back at how many hours she reported studying, and she was like, that's not enough. So she improved her studying. And if there are any first 2 students who were embedded students who want to say anything now, you're welcome to do that now. I want to make sure the students can share. You're welcome to write in the chat, or you know, about how you gained from the embedded student project, or what you saw, or how it affected you. Do any students want to say anything in the chat? Yeah, so you can send it to Joanna, and Joanna can send it out. So it was a great way to measure how much work and study time you were putting in each week. Yes. And actually the faculty found that really interesting, because at the end of the semester, I usually give them a report that documents the average number of hours the embedded students spent on the class per week. And it's kind of interesting how that changes from course to course and from level to level, from say general chemistry to organic chemistry. All right, so any other students who want to share it, please send your comments to Joanna, and she can get them out to the group, so that if you want to remain anonymous, you can. Okay, so I will move on. We did have some instructor comments. Overall, instructors were very positive towards the embedded project. One instructor said the instructor found the reports very insightful. Nice to hear what is working and things that can be improved. This instructor, and this was at the beginning of the semester, I will say, this instructor wished the number of hours the students spent studying, or that they said they were studying, was higher, but did appreciate the students' honesty. And this instructor said they really liked receiving the reports, gives them a perspective each week that they otherwise would not get. Especially like the questions, what would you like your instructor to know? Meaning, what could they do to improve things? And then, because this is a PDSA, we had to decide to adopt, adapt, or abandon. And after the first semester, the pilot, we were like, adopt, right? But then after this semester, we're more like adapt. So where we're at this semester is that instructors do appreciate receiving the reports, but they would like more reports per class and from a larger diversity of students. Sometimes we only had 1 student reporting out per course section, and maybe that student was a really high achieving student, and they may not have gotten as much information as they wanted. They wanted to know how the students were doing who weren't doing as well in the class. What did they suggest for improvements? And then I will say, as a campus coordinator, anonymizing the reports when I had that many students was extremely time consuming, especially because I had so many instructors involved in so many classes, and it took up a couple of hours of my time every Sunday for 15 weeks. So I need a better way of doing it to be moderate on my time. So we may adapt it moving forward by limiting the reporting to specific classes and to specific instructors who want to continue the reporting, and perhaps incentivize the reporting by providing reporting students with extra credit for their class for each report submitted. And actually, Fairmont State University, I believe, is doing something like this semester. So not only has Marshall done something with the embedded project, Fairmont State has as well. So we are moving forward for the fall semester, fall 2021, by probably adapting this, but more to come on that. And then I did want to mention that there's a lot going on in the faculty student engagement group around metacognition, and the reporting does promote metacognition. So this is the ability for students to think about their own learning and understanding, and to be consciously aware that they are problem solvers. And the reporting allows them to monitor and control their mental processing, meaning, am I understanding this material? What do I understand? What don't I understand? And to know what they know and what they don't know, and then to accurately judge their level of learning. So we're hoping the embedded reporting helps with that. And there are other PDSAs going on surrounding metacognition in the faculty student engagement group. So at this point, I will turn it over to Mike Foltz, and I can try to answer questions in the chat as we go.
Okay, any questions from Michelle? Put them in the chat. Now, I'm going to be focusing in on part of the early research experience that the group that First Two Networks supports. I am the chair of the Department of Chemistry at West Virginia State University, but more importantly for this role, I've been working with the early research experiences, the immersive experiences, for the last, well, since it started, the grant started 3 years ago. So I've been around, I've talked with a lot of the faculty organizers, the site leads, but I'd also like to hear from some of the students, because there are a lot of students in this call today who were participants in the camp that can offer a unique perspective as we discuss what went on. So Michelle is going to be running the slides, so you'll hear me say, next slide, please, a couple of times. So we're going to be concentrating on the 2-week summer research program. This program last year was completely virtual due to COVID. So that was a difference from 2 years ago when we had 5 sites that was completely in person. So the requirements, the programming for each of the different years has been different because of the pandemic and how things have been carried out with all the guidelines for face-to-face versus virtual programming. So we've been adapting to meet those needs. But we're going to talk about the benefits. We're going to talk about recruiting, the program, and the results for how things have been progressing. So just to give you a quick overview, can you keep going there? So the benefits. The benefits can be seen in 2 different ways. The benefits for the students and the benefits for the university. The benefits for the students, hopefully all of the students can agree that the students are more likely to be retained and graduate if they get involved in research early, get involved on campus doing something and getting to meet those faculty members. Students get paid to participate. This, for the 2-week program, they got $600. And they lived, the First Two Network covered room and board for those participants to stay on campus, stay in the dorms, and just get to meet one another. There was a lot of network building. One of the comments that the students here talked about was that they got to meet one another over the summer without face masks because everybody was behind computer screens, and get to talk. And then when they came to campus, then everybody was wearing face masks and keeping social distancing. It was a little difficult to get to meet new people because of the isolation that everybody was promoting. And students additionally got to learn about the academic support systems that campuses had, that they got to learn about time management skills, study skills. They learned about what was going on in industry through virtual tours, through in-person tours, depending on the year that they participated. They got to learn, took part in discussions on diversity, on inclusion, from statewide seminars. And I mean, there was just a lot going on through the course of each of the days of the program. Now, some days students were incredibly busy and incredibly tired at the end of the day. Some days was a little more social in nature, and they had a lot of fun, but hopefully we're also very tired at the end of the day. So can we keep going here? The recruitment for the program. We look towards trying to get alumni of the program to help us with the recruiting. So if you've taken part in the program in the past and you know students who would be interested in doing this, please go back to your schools, talk to them, talk to family members, help us fill out the positions again this year. It is oftentimes one of the more difficult parts of the program just to try to find enough people who are interested, who are first generation, underrepresented minorities who want to take part in the program. We do try to support a lot of students. And so there is a lot of recruiting that goes on, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails. So it's not that students don't want to participate, it's just trying to make sure that the word gets out to where enough people know about it. Because I think this year, 80 people that we're trying to support? It's a rather sizable number of rising college freshmen. We've worked with professional organizations. We've worked with HISTA, the West Virginia Science Teachers Association. So if you're part of those programs and you haven't heard from us, please message us so that we can provide more details to you, so that we can then help provide the information so you can provide it to your students. You may need to work with the office of your particular office of admissions, TRIO programs, Upward Bound, but you spend a lot of time building relationships and getting to know your students who are going to be participating on campus. And that's one of the great things, is that they get to know you and you get to know them. So when they come to campus, they're ready to talk to you. They can feel comfortable with you because you've spent all summer long having conversations with them. And you want to make sure to rely on your mentors. The mentors can help you. The network supports a couple of upperclassmen to help you build, to help the rising college freshmen understand what it takes to be successful. Peer mentors to help to give them someone that they can talk to as the camp goes on, as they prepare for camp. For some of these students, it was their first time away from home and they would get extremely homesick. And they needed someone to talk to in a very informal setting that could help them through the homesickness that they were feeling. So keep going. And selection process, you want to make sure that if at all possible, you interview those students. Make sure that they are truly interested in STEM. What do they want to do? Make sure that they don't have conflicting schedules, things of that nature. The program for the First Two Network has been largely dependent, as Dr. Babs talked about. We try to have a lot of testing. What works, what doesn't. When you have 5, 9, 8 different sites, there's a lot of different programming that goes on across the state. Now, there are 3 different aspects of the program that seem to be consistent across all the sites, and those are the 3 that we'll talk about. Now, toward the end, if people want to add on and say what was extremely useful and helpful at their particular site, I would love to hear more. Put it in the chat, make some comments so that we can see more and adapt the programs, provide that feedback for the 2021 site leads. But the three that we're going to talk about are the network building, the college readiness, and the independent knowledge building, the testing, research, database studies that was going on. So can you flip to the next slide? The network building, getting people to get out and talk to one another, to interact. What was really cool, this photo here was from where two sites got together and had a chance to interact and just have a game of kickball in 2019. Now, it is my understanding that I don't have a Twitter account, but it is my understanding that this photo was actually featured on the NSF Twitter feed, which WVSU and Marshall, that's this site. So this was featured by the National Science Foundation. Now, other things that people did, movie nights, video games. WVU has a fantastic recreation center. They took students to professional sporting events. I think they went to some sites went to like minor league baseball activities. But the big thing is just getting students to get together and talk. One of the more popular activities that I've been told about was the students cooking and sharing a meal together. Some students enjoy cooking, but everybody needs to eat. So it brought the students together to have a good time in a very informal setting. Sometimes those were in the dorms. Sometimes those have been reported in faculty housing, or the faculty members' houses, but it just depended on the site. And I mean, that included just cookouts and in-home meals. So campfire type cookouts, as well as just stuff that you would prepare in a kitchen. So the sky is the limit, and there was a lot of imagination that went into what they could do together outside of the labs. So can you keep going? College readiness. One of the goals is to prepare these students for college. And we wanted to make sure that the students understood what they were getting themselves into. We had people we had different sites that would get financial aid offices involved. People not understanding what goes into completing a FAFSA form and the federal work study requirements. People not understanding how to apply for university scholarships. There are some First Two Network students that applied to and received additional scholarship support because of this, because they were a part of this 2-week program. And we're talking significant scholarship support because of their level of interaction with the universities. They got to learn about the site's tutoring, the trio services that campuses may have. Some students had never written a resume before, and to be eligible for scholarships, for work study, for research positions, they needed to have a CV or resume, and it was the first one that they'd ever written before. So they had people who would help them write those. They got to meet with university administrators and faculty, like I said, in a less formal, out of classroom setting. Prepare their class schedules for the fall semester, prepare their academic plans, talk with their advisors, but they got to get a step up on what goes into college for that 2 weeks. And they got immersed in what college life was like. So when they came back for the fall, they had a better understanding of what it took to be successful. And the third aspect that was consistent across all camps was the independent knowledge building. Now, last year during the COVID pandemic summer, everybody went virtual, and so people took part in citizen science type projects. They were creating projects that faculty members, research staff, people were developing projects that students could collect data from across the state of West Virginia and compile that data in ways that we could not have done in person. Students would work in faculty members' research labs, and then they would analyze data sets. Sue Ann at the Green Bank Observatory was talking about how they were assisting in building engineering projects that really made a difference for GBO, that was useful. But beyond just working in the lab, consistent feedback from industry is that students need to work on communication. How do they communicate that knowledge? And so students would then present at the end of their 2-week program, presenting their research work, presenting their data to the rest of their colleagues, so that they got a chance to just practice their communication. And one of the things that you as a site lead, you as an administrator, you as an alum need to remember is that this is a 2-week program for introductory students. We've had some mentors who were kind of hesitant, who gave feedback that, hey, I was expecting more. People are coming out of high school. And just be aware that they need to be trained on how to run different pieces of equipment. But for the most part, faculty are very receptive and understand what it takes, that students need some experience to be useful. These last couple of slides are just based off the results that we had from the 2 sets of camps, 2019, and the next one is 2020. But in comparison, 2019 was the in-person. STEM career is that students know what they want to do when they come in or when they leave. And you see that in each case here, the post-test, there was an increase in whether it be understanding what students want to do as a STEM career, their belief that they can be successful, that they belong at the university, they belong at the university that they're going to, or just at universities in general, that they're ready to go and be successful in college. In each case, these are statewide numbers from 2019 that the numbers increased. And the retention rates for these students, these 25 students, versus just STEM students in general, the 1-year retention rate from freshman to sophomore levels was higher for these students than just the statewide average as a whole. Very small sample size, but it was still higher. When you compare that to 2020, next slide, we had more students participate, and we had a big difference in the number of students who completed the pre-test versus the post-test. But in most of these cases as well, students in the statewide numbers, the overall efficacy, belonging, those numbers went up. The students' belief in their research skills, their personal skills, attitudes about research, all of those numbers went up. Now, when you look at the numbers, there are some that went down, but not significantly. And I think a lot of those were, they're just getting exposed to different areas of STEM that they hadn't thought about in the past. And so, is that where they saw more careers and weren't sure what they wanted to do? I'll let the students who are here maybe hash that out. And if you are the one that answered that question with a lower post-test versus pre-test, maybe you can provide some hints on feedback on that. But the last slide that I think I have is just some comments from the students. These are the interns, the people who came through as participants. And you can see that the experience was useful and helpful for them to overcome a little bit of fear, that they got to learn a little bit about the university, that it was useful for them. And it's something that we do want to continue to build across the state of West Virginia. And I got one more. Will you go to the next one there? That we do want to continue adopting, but also adapting. We do want to continue this program. We do see that it is very useful, but every year so far we've had to adapt the program because of how things have changed. And with so many different sites that are running different types of programs, we've seen different things that have been successful that have been adopted and adapted by other sites for future years. So we want to continue to engage students, and this has been one incredible way for students to have a lot of fun, but also get a lot of very useful information to prepare them for their college careers. So with that, I'm completed. If you have questions or comments, add it into the chat and we'll start addressing those.
Do you want me to share my screen, Michelle? Yeah.
Your go.
Okay. Thanks so much. Sorry I wasn't able to be here at the very beginning, but I'm Catherine Williamson, and I'm sure Sarah, you introduced yourself.
And I'm Sarah Sawyer.
So our section is about breaking down barriers between faculty and students, and our group has done lots of fun stuff, such as like a nature walk to introduce students to biology, or a telescope video to introduce students to astronomy, social mixers, mental health and wellness. We have faculty who are the faculty advisors for some of the campus clubs that many of you students are part of. And Sarah and I have been interested in showcasing more diversity in our classes and having an asynchronous conversation between faculty and students, which I know a lot of you guys have also participated in, and we'll be doing a deep dive into that tomorrow. But for the rest of this session, Sarah and I just wanted to focus on a couple ideas that we think are fun or are exciting to share just for today.
So one of the ideas we've had is breaking down barriers and also especially with incoming students, is just having some social events. So I teach at Glenville State College, and our upper level students have to do research presentations, and we'd like the lower level students, incoming freshmen and sophomore, to come to these events and see the research that's going on and what they could be doing while they were here. So we just hosted an ice cream social that was part of this to draw more students in, and then also get them to meet their faculty early on. And you know, we did it once and then COVID hit, so I haven't been able to follow up on this, but it's something that we would do again. And I'd like to do more social events with them just to overcome that barrier, so that they feel faculty are approachable.
And so we've been trying to show more diversity in our classes as well, and making our class spaces just a safer place for everyone. So this is an example of a slide I showed on the very first day of class. And I tried to, I said that students could change their Zoom name to their preferred name and pronouns, and I asked everyone to do that, and I did it as well. So that was just the first day of class, but I tried to build it throughout the class. If you want to go to the next slide. You can see an example of a scientist highlight that I showed with the announcements of class just at the beginning of class. I have announcements, and I always had a slide featuring a different astronomer from some diverse group. So here's Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein. She's a queer Black astronomer who has written a book, and she's very active in Twitter. And so linking my students to follow her and hear her voice. So next slide. Here's just another example from one day in class. Mary Golder Ross, who I had never heard of before, a Native American female aerospace engineer. And you don't need to read all the text, but I just I talk about these scientists with students for a little while. And I've got a lot more, but again, like I teach astronomy. I mean, in other classes, you would want to feature scientists that are relevant to the discipline. And then, yeah, go ahead. So yeah, and so then midway to after midterm, I invited WVU's LGBTQ+ Center to one of my classes, and we used a whole class period for their anti-racist and gender inclusive training. And I tried to frame it as, you know, who speaks for Earth, who gets to do space exploration, what does it mean to use resources on the moon or Mars or colonize Mars, and how do we think about space exploration in this holistic way of making sure that we're listening to all the voices that matter, especially when we want to be inclusive. So go ahead to the next slide. So that training went pretty well overall. There was actually some significant pushback from students. Just some students. Some students were really grateful we had that training and understood why it would be in an astronomy class, but some students really didn't. And so I really got this question from some white male students asking, why are we learning about this in astronomy? And so for the remainder of the semester, I really came back to it over and over, and specifically pointed to some resources and reports that show that astronomy, unfortunately, is not diverse, as most STEM disciplines are not. I linked to the American Astronomical Society Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion in Astronomy, also the American Physical Society, reports from our societies showing the actual data, and then our department climate survey showing that is a problem at WVU too. So just trying to bring that data and to showcase that thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion is part of our STEM professional development. It is something that professional astronomers think about, is something that professional chemists think about, biologists. And so this is a really important skill for us all to learn. Okay, next slide. So these are some of the reflection questions I asked students. Do you think the moon and Mars count as land that should belong to Earthlings? Why or why not? Do you think space exploration so far has been racist? Why or not? Why not? In what ways does understanding history that's not specific to astronomy impact our thinking about the future of astronomy? And can you see instances of discrimination in astronomy or space sciences? And then how did this training affect you and your framework for who speaks for Earth? Okay, next slide. So since I did have some hateful comments that came into the chat, I did have to remind everyone of the Board of Governors rule of discrimination and the policy for diversity, equity, inclusion, and that is a value of WVU, whether you're student, staff, or faculty. And so that was just a really eye-opening experience for me to kind of wrestle with students kind of reacting in both positive and negative ways. Next slide. So yeah, here's just another slide I showed in class every day after that sort of negative experience. And we would spend time clicking on these different links and exploring just more astronomers together who are diverse in different ways, trying to read actual writings and voices of marginalized astronomers so that I'm not just a white lady explaining what marginalized, like Black women astronomers think. I can't speak for them. So trying to go to actual written sources written by like Black astronomers, Hispanic astronomers, queer astronomers, blind astronomers, and so on. So we would explore these together and I would learn things too alongside with the students, again, just like for a few minutes at the beginning of every class. Okay, next slide. So lots of amazing student comments. The first one is from one of my students who identified as Native American, and when she saw Mary Golda Ross as a Native American astronomer who was doing great things, it inspired her. She said it inspired her to apply to a really prestigious school, and I ended up writing her a recommendation for that. Another student wrote to me how grateful that they were for making the classroom safe because they were going through a gender transition. And they were grateful to be able to change their pronouns on Zoom. And another person reflecting on how they have been a bystander, but they were so glad that when we had those negative comments come through, in the Zoom, they were able to jump in and not be a bystander, at least in this instance. And that gave them more confidence in not being a bystander in the future. Then at the very last day of class, I asked students just their biggest takeaway from the course in general. And a couple of students in those comments said that their biggest takeaway was actually just what it looks like to make an inclusive space, what it looks like to work together and communicate so that we are thinking holistically, and how important it is to be aware of this as we think about our future of space exploration. We can see that, then that second to last quote about a future teacher, a student who is going to be a teacher, said that she is going to use sort of these practices in her class in the future to show how easy it is actually to incorporate this into our everyday work. It doesn't take a lot of extra time. So I think that's it for me. Oh yeah, so kind of in tandem with this, I tried to show students support for their mental health, mental well-being. And some students kind of reached out about that as well, that I just, taking time to show, this was more in the fall, taking time out of class to say, like, you are enough, actually, like, as a human, you're doing enough, you are enough, you matter. And like, you matter in this class, you matter at WVU, you matter in West Virginia, and you matter for Earth and in the universe. So just literally just saying that can go a long way. Next slide. And then coming back to that growth mindset, especially with diversity, equity, inclusion, I have a lot of growth to do personally as well, and just trying to model that with students, that like, we're all trying to learn how to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive together. And then some students just really finding a lot of strength and hope in that mindset of the growth mindset, where we can learn, we can do this, we can figure this out, and kind of coming back to that as a source of strength. Okay, yeah, so those are our promising practices. Just some of them. There's a lot more, and we hope you join us on the First Two Network website. You can join the Faculty Student Engagement Working Group. You can join the Immersive Experiences Working Group, and we'd love to chat with you.
I believe during the conference, there's another opportunity to drop in on a working group, perhaps, if I recall that. And then tomorrow afternoon, we'll be hosting some study sessions where we take one or more of these promising practices and plan to study act cycles, and really looking at the data and deciding how to use that data to improve what we're doing. So you are all welcome, if you are new to the First Two Network, to join a working group in that session tomorrow afternoon as well.
And so we were going to go into breakout rooms now. That was the suggestion that in our instructions. So Sean, can you put us into breakout rooms, or?
Yep, I am creating them right now.
And then can people rename themselves?
So, and we are done with this one at 4:30, is that correct?
4:45.
4:45, okay, thank you.
Yep. So Sean, are people able to rename themselves? They could put the breakout room they want to go into in front of their name.
Okay, yeah, yep, I can see the date.
Or sometimes you can do, I don't know if this Zoom will let you choose your breakout room. Sometimes you can,
Yes.
that might be easiest.
That might be easiest. So
Hmm.
if you want to join the embedded students and find out more about that, join breakout room number 1. Just choose that for yourself. If you want early research, choose breakout room number 2, and breaking down barriers, breakout room number 3. So we'll set up 3 breakout rooms. And if you have trouble putting yourself into the one you want, we'll see that and we'll join you in. You can just tell us which one you want to get into.
Okay, I've opened the